Hello, this is Wendell back with my third video on mounting a motor on a Whirley Pop popcorn popper for roasting coffee. Someone suggested just drilling a hole through the top of the gear guard, and so I thought, well, that's a good idea. I'll try that, see how that works. It's always easier to think of these things than it is to actually execute them. The previous method I used, if you watch the other two videos, is I cut the gear guard and then bit it up, and I used that to mount the motor on, and that worked pretty well. It doesn't look that clean, but it works remarkably well, using a nylon spacer as the coupler between the shaft of the stir and the motor. So doing this, I encountered three difficulties I did not have with the other project. First, you have to have an 1.25 inch nylon spacer to use as your coupler. And after a lot of searching and research and running to the hardware store, came to the conclusion that they don't make them bigger than an inch. I did find one that was larger than an inch, but I did not feel like ordering a 38-cent piece in the mail with the shipping charges up to $5. So what I did instead is I used 3 nylon spacers to create this Frankenstein coupler. So I bought a couple 5/8 inch, actually when I got them home measuring them, they were 3/4 of an inch. So instead of running back to the hardware store, I just cut one of them shorter. And then they have a 1/2 inch outer diameter, so I used another nylon coupler with a 1/2 inch inner diameter. It's not very thick, so you have to, after you drill the holes in the I don't know what you would call that, the middle one that connects the other two together, you have to drill the holes in there and then mark through the hole onto the inside to know where and then you got to drill out a little space for the Allen screw to go into, because it's just too thin. If you don't give it some space on the other side for it to go through, it just doesn't hold. So this is the product from that. I got it at the right height for fitting in there. It goes on to mount the two shafts together. So that was the first difficulty that I had to overcome. The second is that drilling in stainless steel is difficult if you don't have the right drill bit. My cheap drill bits are good for plastic and wood, and maybe some other soft metals like aluminum, but for stainless steel they don't quite do the job. It took me at least 3, maybe 4 hours to get this hole drilled out using my existing drill bits. So then to do this other hole here, which we'll talk about later, I finally got smart and went and bought a cobalt drill bit, 1/8 inch, to drill that hole. And that went remarkably quick in just a few minutes. Then the third thing, which is related to that hole right there, is how do you keep the motor anchored? Because with the old system, you can mount the motor right on that piece of metal sticking up, but on this there's nothing really convenient to mount the motor to. You put that on there, and you got to have it mounted to something to keep it from just spinning, because it's going to spin instead of the stirrer. So that's why I drilled this hole right here, taking advantage of the mounting holes on the bottom of the motor. So I'm using this one that's closest to the shaft, and that's why that hole there is really close to the bigger hole. using an M3. If I can get this in the camera, here we go. An M3 Allen head screw. That just goes up into that hole. There we go. It just goes up in that hole right there, and then there's a hole in the heat shield. It's kind of hard to get that lined up, so I had to go at it a couple times there and make it bigger. So that'll go right through the heat shield and up into the motor. And that all goes together. Put your shaft in there, and you're good to go. I haven't actually tested this yet, but I'll add some video when I get it all together, put back together, and see how it works. So here's the, I got it all put together. It was really difficult to get that screw through the gear cover, through the heat shield, and into the motor. I'd take an Allen wrench and cut off about an inch and use it to guide the screw into the hole and turn it. Because you can't fit anything down in there except for the short end, and it doesn't give you the dexterity you need. So here we go, turn it on. I've already tried it out. It does work okay. I think though with the having to mount the motor directly to the gear cover with that M3 screw kind of takes away some of the flexibility. And you can hear, you know, the shaft alignment's not perfect, so it's going to wiggle a little bit. If there's a way you could figure out how to do that, I'd appreciate someone telling me. But we're up, almost up to 300 degrees. It's about 10 degrees here today in the garage. Had a little difficulty getting the flame on my Coleman stove. Usually you have to turn the lever up here, but I found it was easier to start in this cold. You can leave the lever down. It does flood a little bit, but you can get it going anyway. So there you go. There's the motor mounted through a hole drilled in the gear cover. It looks a lot cleaner, but I do not recommend it because it's just really difficult to get everything put together. And I think you lose, like I said, you lose some flexibility here. It allows the motor to flex because of the shaft misalignment. But otherwise, it seems to be working. I've got my green beans here ready to go in, so I'm going to roast it, and hopefully it'll work well.